Good morning, friends. Good morning, and welcome to another gathering of our small group known as PB Reads the Bible. And I'm PB, Pastor Brian, pastor here at St. Andrew's United Methodist Church, and I'm also pastor at Bethany United Methodist Church, both of which are in Milton, Pennsylvania. And thank you for joining me this morning. Perhaps you've joining us for the first time. You're just kind of scrolling along. This popped up, and you're wondering what's going on. Well, PB Reads the Bible is a small group where I do that. I read from the Bible. I read out loud using the Common English Bible translation, and I share comments and commentary about it to help us understand some of the intricacies, some of the language that's being used, and what it really meant then, because what it meant then is what it means now, and to help understand the context, because sometimes the social context is so different from 2,000 years ago that we miss things. So I've been trying to do that for you as we've worked our way through Mark. Now, again, if this is your first time stopping by, welcome. You've missed quite a bit. We're almost done. We're going to be looking at the second half of chapter 14 and the first half or 2/3 of chapter 15. And there's only 16 chapters in Mark. Please stay anyway. We'd love to have you join us, and then you can always go back and review the prior sessions, because they are all recorded there on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. By this point, you might have to go to the YouTube channel because Facebook deletes our videos after 1 month. So you go to our YouTube channel and you can catch up everything right there. They're all in one thing. Excuse me. So thanks for joining me, for everybody, including our longtime attendees. Great to have you with us. And if you are a longtime attendee, you know what I'm going to be saying next, and that is to check in, to let me know you're there. This is Romper Room roll call time, and I see some of those things popping up. The same goes true for our friends who are joining us at a different time. So for me, it's Tuesday, August 26th, and it's 9:04 a.m., because I started a minute late, and I'm already talking a lot. But for some of you, you're only able to join on your lunch breaks or after work or sometime in the middle of the night. Please go ahead and check in, and again, say ask your questions and place your comments in the stream, whether you're live or joining us some other time, because I'll be going back in to see. Same thing for joys and concerns, whatever it is that's lifting you up and weighing you down. We're a small group. We share life together. And that means we keep each other surrounded in prayer, lifted in prayer. Good morning, BP from PB. Oops, I forgot to do that again. I have to remember to hit do not disturb. Good morning, Crystal. Good morning again, Crystal. Yeah, I already saw Crystal this morning. Good morning, Marcia. Walking and listening. See, you folks are great at that multitasking. I'd probably trip and fall if I was trying to do that. So wonderful. As long as you're not driving and typing, that would be a bigger issue, right? We don't do that. But I see. Good morning, Sharon. You're also here with us this morning, Sharon Cope, and John and Cindy. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Great. This is great stuff, folks. Keep signing in, keep marking your attendance. Not that I keep attendance. And keep offering your questions and your comments, and as well as your joys and concerns. What's giving you life? What's weighing you down? Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, indeed. So, let's start with that, shall we? Let's start with our prayer. We've got some things we've been praying about. Let's see what's going on here. So we prayed for Julie Blanton. Her surgery a couple weeks ago went well. She's recovering. She's going through therapy. She's doing all the things she's supposed to be doing. Same thing for Kathy Wyan. We prayed for her last week. She had a knee surgery, knee replacement, and she seems to be doing well, which is also great. Ask for prayers for Irene and Claire Dick for two different reasons. Irene injured her head almost 2 weeks ago, and she's been having headaches ever since. They said it could take 2 weeks for that to clear up, and that's unfortunate. I think she was getting a little bit better, and then might have overdone things this past weekend with football, going to the football game, and so the headaches are back. So prayers for that. And Claire injured her foot, and actually it might be a fracture. It might be a stress fracture. So prayers for her, and prayers for patience for her, because I know she wants to get out there and compete with track and field and cross country. So prayers for patience as she recovers. And I don't have my note from the other day. Bummer. But we know the things we've been praying for, and God knows, more importantly, God knows those things we're praying for. So let's just lift all that to God. Good morning, Papa. Thank you for this glorious day. Nice and cool, a nice cool day. Although it's still technically summer, we can kind of see fall right around the corner. We can feel fall is right around the corner based on these temperatures the last couple of days, and what's predicted for tomorrow as well. And we thank you for that. The changing seasons are our blessing, even if they may not be our favorites. We can always find joy in them and find the beauty in the changing of the seasons as well. So help us do that. Help us to see the beauty. Help us to find the beauty and the joy as the seasons change. You know all the things on our hearts and our minds, the ones I've mentioned, and as well as the ones I haven't mentioned. So we just lift all that to you and trust in you and your mercy and your grace and your healing power as it's needed. And help us to just be calm. Help us to truly turn over all of our cares to you this morning and be focused on this moment, on this time together as we continue our journey through the Gospel of Mark, and open our hearts and our minds to what you would have us receive today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Did I miss anybody? Nope. Okay, cool. So, yes, when last we met, we were in the middle of chapter 14. Middle of chapter 14. We ended with verse 42. So we're going to pick up from there. It's sort of a cliffhanger ending as Jesus was in the garden, had just prayed and stuff with his disciples, had those 3 prayers, and he says, get up, let's go, look, here comes my betrayer. That's where it ended. Oh, what's going to happen next? Good morning, Bonnie. Good to see you this morning as well. Of course, if you've read the story, if you've heard the story, you know what's going to happen next. But if you didn't, kind of like that idea of not knowing, oh, what's going to happen? So we're going to pick up from there, verse 43. Suddenly, while Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, came with a mob carrying swords and clubs. They had been sent by the chief priests, legal experts, and elders. His betrayer had given them a sign: arrest the man I kiss and take him away under guard. Pause. Okay, so couple different things. That's that classic thing. The one I kiss will be the one. So a kiss is meant for a friend, or even more than just a friend. But especially at the time, the culture, a kiss is reserved for a friend. It's not necessarily romantic love or anything like that. It's a sign of friendship. It's a sign of friendship. But Judas is twisting it. He's twisting it. He's using a sign of friendship to betray his friend. It's like, I've heard the expression, it's the ultimate betrayal, and it truly is, as he is twisting this sign of friendship to show how far he's gone. How far he's gone from being friends with Jesus. Well, the other thing to mention is there's a list of these things. They're carrying, they came with a mob. And they're carrying swords and clubs. So they're anticipating violence. The the chief priests that sent them, the legal experts that sent them, the elders that sent them, and this whole mob themselves must have been expecting violence. So they came prepared. They came strapped. They got their swords and clubs as they're going to town. They're anticipating violence. Verse 45. As soon as he got there, Judas said to Jesus, "Rabbi." Then he kissed him. Then they came and grabbed Jesus and arrested him. One of the bystanders drew a sword and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his ear. Jesus responded, Have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me like an outlaw? Day after day I was with you teaching in the temple, but you didn't arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled. And all his disciples left him and ran away. One young man, a disciple, was wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They grabbed him, but he left the linen cloth behind and ran away naked. Pause. So, they came expecting violence, and there is some violence. One of the bystanders, we often think of this image, we often have this image, we think of this scene as Jesus and the 11 disciples, and only them. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. It says there are others. It says there were bystanders. And it says more than one, because it says there was one of the bystanders. It doesn't say one of the disciples. If it was one of the disciples, I'm pretty sure Mark would have said one of the disciples. Now, one of the other Gospels, and I think it's Luke, it's either Luke or John, it might be John, says that it's Peter. Specifically identifies it as Peter. Let's separate the stories. For Mark, it's one of the bystanders. For Mark, it's one of the bystanders who came with a sword. Doesn't say he took a sword from someone else. He drew a sword and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his ear. So what does this tell us? This tells us that maybe the expectations of the chief priests, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the elders, and the mob wasn't too far off the point. At least some of the bystanders, at least one of the bystanders, was ready for violence and had a sword with him. But Jesus responds and says, Have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me like an outlaw? And the word that he uses that's translated outlaw, it's a certain type of outlaw, and perhaps bandit or brigand is a better translation of the word. Outlaw is a little bit more generic. The word lestai, L-E-S-T-A-I, is a stronger word. It's a particular type of outlaw, meaning ones that usually use violence. Have you come to me with clubs and swords to arrest me like a violent criminal? A little bit, maybe a little bit touch of almost irony going on here. And it's the same word that Jesus had used when he had his eruption of anger at the temple and said, You've turned this place into a den of thieves, is how we usually translate it or whatever, but it's the same word, lestai, this violent criminal. Violent criminal. And he says, I was always in the temple. You knew where to find me. You knew where to find me, but you wouldn't. And we know, based on what Mark has said earlier, that's because those religious leaders were afraid of the crowds. And so they had to come to him at night. They had to come to him in secret. They had to come to him when he would have fewer people around. All his disciples left him and ran away. I'm sorry. He says, but let the scriptures be fulfilled. We don't know what Mark meant by that, really, because he doesn't specify. It could be a reference to Isaiah, one of the late chapters of Isaiah 52, 53. talking about the suffering servant, which was actually a description of what Israel was supposed to be like, and what would happen to Israel if Israel maintained righteousness and devotion to God. But Jesus fits the description of this suffering servant perfectly. So Christians have taken this and said it's about Jesus. It's not really a messianic prophecy, that section of Isaiah 52:53. But Jesus fits the description perfectly. So we might see that one in this as the scripture that needs to be fulfilled. But what happens right after that, after he says that? All is just because he says, let the scriptures be fulfilled. Not that they have been, but let them be fulfilled. And what happens right after that? All the disciples run away. Run away, run away. Which we can think back to just a chapter earlier when Jesus tells the disciples, he predicts to them, you're going to leave me. And he quotes scripture at that point. I will hit the shepherd and the sheep will go off in all directions. So it makes a lot of sense that Jesus is actually talking about what's right about to happen, and the disciples leave and they run away. Now, those last two verses are a touch of humor thrown in, but also confusing. We don't know. It says, one young man, a disciple, not one of the 12, was wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They grabbed him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. There are multiple understandings for this. One of the most popular legends that has come up out of this, and it was told to me when I was in Sunday school. I'm sure it was in Sunday school as a teenager or something. That's Mark. That this was Mark, and it was sort of a little bit of because since he's the only one that talks about this guy who runs away naked, it must have been him. Okay, that's not much proof. There's an old tradition. I didn't know this one. But there's an early church tradition that Jesus had just raised this young man from the dead. That's why he's wrapped in this linen cloak, this linen cloth. Basically, that's all he's got on. It's because Jesus has just raised him from the dead there in the garden. Obviously, there's no scriptural proof for that. It's just an interesting little tradition that's come along. Now, one of the other ways to think about this is that in some ways it's an echo to back to the book of Genesis, to Joseph when he is serving in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife tried to get him to have sex with her, and she grabbed his cloak, his towel, and he ran off presumably naked, leaving the towel behind, his cloak behind. So we can see this almost as an echo to that, and we can see that they're we can see in this that they were interested in arresting anyone. This mob was willing to arrest anyone who happened to be there. So much so, and drove so much fear into this young man, that he was willing to run away naked rather than get arrested by this mob with swords and clubs, which fully fulfills Jesus' prediction about I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Okay, picking up from there. Got to get going here, Brian. They led Jesus away to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and legal experts gathered. Peter followed him from a distance, right into the high priest's courtyard. He was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for testimony against Jesus in order to put him to death, but they couldn't find any. Pause. So he's used this he's used this word all, and everybody, all of them were gathered together. All the chief priests, elders, and legal experts, the whole Sanhedrin. Can you repeat after me? Can you exaggerate much? It probably wasn't everybody. There's confusion about the Sanhedrin, and especially at this time. Roman law said only Romans, only Roman law could execute somebody. That the Sanhedrin couldn't do it. The Sanhedrin, prior to that, had that power. They were, if something was blasphemous, if something was justifiable of execution based on religious law, they had the power, but not with the Roman Empire. Not with the Roman Empire. So the idea of them gathering, Mark is setting things up, and Mark is pointing fingers, etc. And he's talking about this massive gathering of people, this large gathering of people, but this whole just plot, this massive plot that's involving everybody. Did it involve everybody? Okay, yes, but not all at the same time, and they weren't all there. If we read the other gospel accounts, especially John's, it speaks about maybe some of them were gathered together. They were preparing to go before the entire Sanhedrin, kind of thing. So we're not sure, ultimately, is the point. But they couldn't find any testimony against him. Picking up there, verse 56. Many brought false testimony against him, but they contradicted each other. Some stood to offer false witness against him, saying, "We have heard him saying, 'I will destroy this temple, constructed by humans, and within 3 days I will build another, one not made by hands.'" But their testimonies didn't agree even on this point. Pause. So, the Ten Commandments, there's the one in there, do not bear false witness. You might have been taught, and I know I was taught, that means don't lie. That's not the full context of what that commandment from the book of Exodus means. It specifically says, do not bear false witness. Do not bear false witness. In other words, it's don't lie in court. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. It's not don't lie about your neighbor. It's don't bear false witness. It has to do with lawsuits and with justice. It has to do with justice. So Mark is clear with his language that they're violating that commandment because they're bearing false witness. Now, one of the other laws of the Old Testament is you had to have 2 witnesses. You had to have at least 2 witnesses to anything. Thinking that one person could lie, but if 2 people agree in their witness of what happened in their accounts, well, then they're probably telling the truth. Not necessarily so, and there were definite instances in the Old Testament where multiple witnesses were paid to bear false witness, to lie on the stand, so to speak, in order to make bad things happen. Where was I going with that? That's what's happening here. And even though they're trying, they can't even get 2 people to agree on the lie. They can't get 2 people to agree on the lie. And then they're misquoting Jesus. So some of them heard from somebody who heard, or heard from somebody who heard from somebody who heard from somebody who heard Jesus say about the temple. And they misquote him, saying, "I will destroy this temple, constructed by humans, and within 3 days I will build another, one not made by humans." The idea of a temple not made by human hands was actually a cultural understanding, not only in Judaism but throughout the Middle Eastern religions and belief systems, about a god bringing a temple down and having it there, one that wasn't made by people. So which was interesting to know and think about. And so they were thinking of this physical temple type thing, where, of course, Christians, we read this and interpret it and understand Jesus isn't speaking about that temple. He's speaking about himself, because he is the new temple. Remember, throughout these last few chapters, the temple in Jerusalem, Herod's temple, has been a main character, and it still has a part to play as we see the ultimate fulfillment of it losing its power. Okay, picking up from there. Then the high priest stood up in the middle of the gathering and examined Jesus. Aren't you going to respond to the testimony these people have brought against you? But Jesus was silent and didn't answer. Again, the high priest asked, Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? Jesus said, I am. And you will see the human one sitting on the right side of the Almighty and coming on the heavenly clouds. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, Why do we need any more witnesses? Excuse me. You've heard his insult against God. What do you think? They all condemned him. He deserves to die. Some began to spit on him. Some covered his face and hit him, saying, Prophesy. Then the guards took him and beat him. Pause. So, Mark was clear in his statements from Jesus regarding when Jesus was predicting the passion part. He said he would be ridiculed, slandered, and beat and spit upon. And so Mark is very careful to make sure that all those things that Jesus talked about are going to happen. Not only once, they're going to happen multiple times. The mockery, the spitting, and the beating. Picking up from there. Meanwhile, Peter was below in the courtyard. A woman, one of the high priest's servants, approached and saw Peter warming himself by the fire. She stared at him and said, You were also with the Nazarene, Jesus. But he denied it, saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand what you're saying. And he went outside into the outer courtyard. A rooster crowed. The female servants saw him and began a second time to say to those standing around, This man is one of them. But he denied it again. A short time later, those standing around again said to Peter, You must be one of them, because you are also a Galilean. But he cursed and swore, I don't know this man you're talking about. At that very moment, a rooster crowed a second time. Peter remembered what Jesus told him, Before a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down, sobbing. Pause. End of chapter 14, but pause. So I read that whole thing for a reason. So, yes, he denies 3 times. Let's look at what happened at each of these things. The woman has a very clear accusations, and she approaches Peter with them, and we hear him say, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't even understand what you're saying. Right? He speaks. We've got the response. And then he leaves. He's been on the inner court. Now he's going to go to the outer courtyard. Peter is trying to flee. He's trying to get away, but he doesn't get all the way away. So then she sees him again. This time she doesn't direct her accusations to him, but she tells others about it and says, I know I saw this guy. Now, we don't have Peter's words here, but we're told he denies him a second time. And so then he moves a little bit farther away. Doesn't want to be near with these people. But they come over. After a period of time, we don't know how long, and there's the third accusation, followed by the third denial. Then he hears the crow. Apparently he didn't hear the the crow of the rooster, I should say. He doesn't hear the rooster. He hears the rooster crow, and we're told it's the second time. I always wondered, did he not hear it the first time? Or did he hear it and it didn't register? Because it was like he had a chance to change. Did he hear it after the first denial but still go on with the second and the third one? Did he forget what Jesus had said? It was only a few hours ago. Or did he not hear it? The answer is, I don't know. I don't know. All right, picking up from there, chapter 15. At daybreak, the chief priests with the elders, legal experts, and the whole Sanhedrin, again, formed a plan. They bound Jesus, led him away, and turned him over to Pilate. Pilate questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "That's what you say." The chief priests were accusing him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Aren't you going to answer? What about all these accusations?" But Jesus gave no more answers, so that Pilate marveled. Pause. Pilate probably didn't marvel. What we know about the historical figure of Pilate is he did not like the Jews. He did not like the Jews. And he used violence. He used the power of Rome to do things he wanted to do that hurt the Jews. And he didn't care about hurting Jews. Mark seems to be intentionally, and Mark's probably not the only one, making it look like Pilate's softer than he definitely softer than he was. He really had no need to. The idea of executing someone, no problem. Based on what the historical person of Pilate did, what's one more Jew to execute? Nothing. So it really seems to be Mark just pointing all the fingers at the religious leaders. And yes, they were to blame. Absolutely, they were to blame. But Pilate wasn't the innocent victim that we often make him out to be. He wasn't being controlled by them. There's a lot in here that probably didn't really happen. We'll talk about it. Jesus replied, Pilate marveled. Pick up from there, verse 6. During the festival, Pilate released one prisoner to them, whoever they requested. Pause. There's no historical evidence that this was a common practice, even by Pilate or by anybody else. He may have done it once or twice. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. But the Gospels seem to make it sound like it's a regular practice every year at the festival. Pilate had no concern, no interest for the festival, Passover. But it seems to be just something that he did from time to time. But Mark has connected it to the Passover festival. Picking up from there, verse 7. A man named Barabbas was locked up with the rebels who had committed murder during an uprising. Pause. I should wait, but I'm going to pause anyway. I was going to talk a moment about the name Barabbas. A few chapters ago, I had said when a name starts with Bar, that means son of. So Bartholomew is the son of Tholomew, I guess. I don't know, something like that. Bartimaeus is the one we were talking about. Blind Bartimaeus. He is the son of Timaeus. So Barabbas is Bar-Abbas, son of Abbas. What's Abbas? The father. Son of the father. It's Abba, which is usually, it's translated father, but it's also sometimes thought of as meaning daddy, like it's a more intimate name for father than the father. But regardless, it's son of the father, which is such an interesting thing. It was a real name. Barabbas was a real name that was used from time to time. But I wonder, why was he named that? Is it because they didn't know who his father was? Like his father wasn't named? Usually, if you're going to name your kid after yourself, you're going to put Bar in front of it. So it's Bar Bryant, or Bar John, or Bar Timaeus. But this is Barabbas. I'm his dad, but that's not my name. So is it a case of they didn't know who the Father was? I find that interesting. But the other side of that is, the irony is, he is named Son of the Father when we know, and he's being released, and we know that Jesus is literally the Son of the Father. The Son of the Father. All right. And he was arrested and locked up with the rebels who had committed murder during an uprising. In other words, with brigands and bandits. These are violent people. He is in prison for the things that he is guilty and in prison for the things for which Jesus has been arrested but is innocent of. Picking up from there, verse 8, the crowd pushed forward and asked Pilate to release someone, as he regularly did. Pilate answered them, do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? He knew that the chief priests had handed him over because of jealousy, but the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas to them instead. Pilate replied, then what do you want me to do with the one you call king of the Jews? They shouted back, crucify him. Pilate said to them, why? What wrong has he done? They shouted even louder, crucify him! Pilate wanted to satisfy the crowd, so he released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus whipped, then handed him over to be crucified. Pause. So, again, Mark is really building on this idea of it's the religious elders, the religious leaders, the elders, and they're whipping up the crowd to do what they want, and Pilate is just falling in line. Picking up from there, verse 16, the soldiers led Jesus away into the courtyard of the palace known as the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole company of soldiers. Pause. Again, probably an exaggeration when he says the whole company of soldiers. That would have been a large group of people. So, most likely not. We don't exactly know where this courtyard was, where the praetorium was. But, it's somewhere in Jerusalem and possibly near the temple. In fact, quite probably near the temple. Picking up from there, verse 17, they dressed him up in a purple robe and twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on him. They saluted him, hey, King of the Jews! Again and again they struck his head with a stick. They spit on him and knelt before him to honor him. When they finished mocking him, they stripped him of the purple robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. Pause. So again, we see that repetition of the spitting, the mocking, the beating, all that taking place. Again, fulfillment of Jesus' prediction of the Passion. And Mark just making sure everybody gets it. Notice what... And again, what isn't in this story, right? What isn't in this story? I like to ask that question sometimes when I'm reading the different Gospels, or when I'm reading a story that I know very well. I'll stop and say, not only what is in the story, I'll stop and say what isn't in the story. What isn't in the story is Jesus being whipped. Mark does not have Jesus being flogged, being whipped. That's in at least one of the other Gospels, but Mark doesn't have that. I don't know why. That's something I'm going to have to think about, I guess. But they lead him out to crucify him. 21. Simon, a man from Cyrene, Alexander and Rufus' father, was coming in from the countryside. They forced him to carry his cross. Pause. Pause. So who is this Simon the Cyrene, and who are Rufus and Alexander? We don't know. Mark included this person and these people, these three names, in this, probably probably included them because they were known at the time. They were known at the time. We don't know anything about them. There's really no historical record of them. But the early church that Mark was writing to, wherever it was at, must have known who these people were. And so Mark makes sure to mention them by name. Again, not saying it didn't happen. It happened. But that's why he mentions them by name, because they were known to the people to whom he was writing. Right. Now, we usually have the image, and it will be acted out on streets and plays on Palm Sunday or around Palm Sunday by numerous churches and faith groups and everything. And we've had it done here. I'm sure I've seen the picture of it. And Jesus is carrying the whole cross. The whole cross. We've got the giant T over Jesus' shoulder, and he's dragging it along the road. And so, a neighbor church to one that I served many years ago, they had a crosswalk, and they had this big wooden cross, the full cross. They had it on wheels, and I think they took turns carrying it. However far they said Jesus carried it that day. Historical records show that it wouldn't have been the full cross. Okay, it wouldn't have been the full cross. It would have been the crossbar, the cross beam, or whatever it was they used. We have, of course, that image of this finely crafted, very, very straight vertical beam and a very, very straight horizontal beam, making this perfect intersection between the two. The Romans executed a lot of people. They crucified a lot of people. It's in other historical documents. I believe Josephus, in his book of his historical novel, speaks about times when people would be, the street would almost be lined with people on crosses. And you've probably seen images of that in movies. To use like this finely shaped, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. What some historians believe and what some biblical scholars believe is they used trees. They used trees. And they used, like a log or a limb of a tree, that's what they carried them up and nailed them onto a tree. That goes very well with scripture that says literally hanging on a tree. It's probably not quite so straight. The arms might have been up and down, or even bent farther back. Who knows? But anyway, so they forced him to carry the cross. Rather than thinking of that full cross, this is just the cross beam, the horizontal beam, crossbar, whatever you want to call it, that Jesus had to carry. Now Jesus is said tells his disciples, in multiple places in the Gospels, that you've got to pick up your cross and follow me. And yet Mark tells this story, and Jesus doesn't carry his cross. Jesus doesn't carry his cross. Somebody else carries it for him, Simon the Cyrene, which is interesting. It does lead us to a question: why? Did one of the guards or two of the guards, did they kind of think, we've gone too far? We've gone too far. This is just, let's be nice to him now. We've beat on him enough. Let's make somebody else carry it for him instead. Or is it a case that all the beatings have weakened him to the point where where he can't carry the cross? I know sometimes in movies they show Jesus starting off with the cross but falling multiple times, and then they grab Simon and pull him in to carry the cross the rest of the way. That's not what Mark says. That's not what Mark says. They say that this guy carried the cross for Jesus, apparently the whole way. Anyway, things to think about, right? They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means skull place. Pause. I'm going to pause for a moment there because we call it Calvary, right? Well, it's because Golgotha is Hebrew, and excuse me, Golgotha is Hebrew, and Calvary is Latin. It's based on Latin, so we've got the two things, but it's Golgotha, meaning the skull. Excuse me. So it means skull place, means the skull. They tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh, but he didn't take it. Wine mixed with myrrh is thought to have been an anesthetic, but Jesus intentionally doesn't take this anesthetic, something to drug him, put him to sleep. Contrary to the disciples who kept falling asleep in the garden when all he was doing was praying, Jesus is going to stay awake through this whole thing. They crucified him. They divided up his clothes, drawing lots for them to determine who would take what. It was 9 in the morning when they crucified him. The notice of the formal charge against him was written, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 outlaws with him, one on his right and one on his left. And again, it's that Mastai. It's the violent criminal. People walked by, insulted him, shaking their heads and saying, "Ha! So you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, were you? Save yourself and come down from that cross." In the same way, the chief priests were making fun of him among themselves together with the legal experts. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross. Then we'll see and believe." Even those who had been crucified with Jesus insulted him. Pause. So again, we've got the insults, the mockery, the false homage taking place throughout this passage, including those legal experts. And they throw in that, let him come down from the cross, then we'll see and believe. Don't read that as a possibility of them even thinking that. That's sarcasm. They have seen and not believed. The disciples have seen, and they still haven't truly believed or understood what's taking place or anything about Jesus. Even those who had been crucified with Jesus insulted him. Verse 33. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, 6 hours, the whole earth was dark. At 3, Jesus cried out with a loud shout, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you left me?" Pause. That's that's Psalm 22. I forget which verse. It's a line in Psalm 22. So what was Jesus saying? Was Jesus literally saying, did Jesus feel that God had left him and had abandoned him? Or was he quoting from this psalm, which was an extremely well-known psalm? We use Psalm 23 at funerals. They use Psalm 22 at funerals, at least they do today, because by the end it is a psalm of salvation. Is Jesus trying to get people to remember the whole thing, and is he pointing to the end only by talking about the beginning? Picking up from there, after hearing him, some standing there said, "Look, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, and put it on a pole. He offered it to Jesus to drink, saying, "Let's see if Elijah will come to take him down." But Jesus let out a loud cry and died. The curtain of the sanctuary was torn in 2 from top to bottom. When the centurion who stood facing Jesus saw how he died, he said, "This man was certainly God's son." Some women were watching from a distance, including Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, the younger one, and Joseph and Salome. When Jesus was in Galilee, these women had followed and supported him, along with many other women who had come to Jerusalem with him. pause in our reading for today. So the crowd is asking for, saying, oh, they misunderstood Jesus, and he's calling for Elijah. And we know that Elijah is not going to come because Elijah has already come in the person of John the Baptist and been executed. And even though it's not specifically said that, Jesus says Elijah has come, and they did with him as they always do, which we interpret as a reference to John the Baptist. So we know that he's not coming. The wording is interesting, though, the way they say that. Let's see if Elijah will come and take him down from the cross. That doesn't necessarily mean save his life. It means they might be still thinking of some sort of a miraculous appearance, take him off the cross and be taken away in a way similar to Elijah, with the chariots of fire, the whole thing. But some sort of a miraculous ending to it. The centurion said, certainly, this man was certainly God's son. We don't know what it was about seeing him that made him think that. It was it's a common element to stories of martyrs that at the end, the people who were guilty of the execution of the martyr have a little bit of have a touch of guilt and realize, oh no, we did the wrong thing. So some people say, it's just the centurion having that reaction, that Mark's giving that centurion the reaction, but his words are much more than just that. So this man was certainly God's son. So something about the way he died, which, by the way, was shorter than a lot of them would have been in crucifixions. He's on the cross for 6 hours, according to Mark's telling right there. Which we think, man, 6 hours is a long time to be hanging on a piece of wood, I'm sure. But a lot of them were 20 to 24 hours in length. That's why I think it's in John, since it's the day of preparation or whatever, according to him, they want the criminals' legs to be broken and have them come down off the cross because it's about to be that special holy day. Because they didn't die fast enough. Only Jesus did, and they were surprised when they get to Jesus and see that he is dead. And so is Pilate when Joseph asks for his body. He says, he's dead already? All right, my friends, that's going to be it for today. I pray this has been beneficial. We'll be back together on Thursday, August 28th, 2025. And we'll finish 15 and go into 16. And that might be surprising to you how we handled chapter 16, and that's the last chapter. And also on Thursday, I'm saving the announcement until Thursday. I'll let you know what we'll be doing next. Why am I saving that? Because I still need to make my decision. So hopefully between now and Thursday, I will make my final decision of what we're going to next. I have to count up days that I'm going to be available to try to figure out how short or long of a book of the Bible I can do, because I do have vacation coming up in October. All right, my friends, as you go about your days, not just today, but every day, keep those eyes and ears, physical and spiritual, open to everything our living, loving, active God is doing in your life and in the lives of those around you. When you see it, when you hear it, say, thank you, Papa, and then tell somebody about it, including me. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed. Be blessed. Bye.